Now? Better? All right. All right. Corb, can we close those back doors? Thank you. All right. Cool. Y'all, thanks for sticking around for Floats and Finances. If you didn't get a root beer float yet, why? They're out in the lobby. You can grab one. Also, I know I like managing the frozenness of ice cream's a thing, but at some point, if you're like, I'm bored with this presentation, I need another root beer float, just go get one. Like I'm sure there are plenty. But thanks for sticking around. Our intent for this time is to give you a bunch of information, and then there is just some live Q&A that we'll do at the end. So whether you're holding questions that we're addressing today, or something you're like, hey, you didn't talk about this at all, but what's going on over here? Just know that time is coming, and so you can hold those for the end. But my hope for the day is not just to walk through the financial side of Discovery, but some of the other things that have been going on around this place. So I also know we're filming this, and there'll be folks that'll be watching this after the fact. So if you couldn't make it, thanks for tuning in and watching this information. Let me begin just with a prayer, and then we'll jump in. God, the Western Church is funny. And I think where I watched the first century, and it's a bunch of ragtag people getting together for dinner in each other's homes, and it's church, and it's beautiful. That the way that we practice church here is we have a mortgage, and we have a electricity bill, and we have a benevolence fund. It's just so dynamic. And so in the things we talk about today, I pray for myself, I pray for each of us, that we would just keep in mind how wildly dynamic and beautiful your bride is. And also to confess that the way that we are practicing church here at Discovery is our best work that we can do right now. Give us the grace to see where we can be doing better. And for sure the celebration to note the places where we're doing a really good job. Thanks to these folks who care to know about these inner workings of things. Let our conversation be good, our questions and answers be as clear as they can be. And we ask all of this in your name. Amen. All right, y'all. If you don't know, and they're out on the drinking fountain now all the time, so you can see them in real time, but these are your elders for this year. The elder calendar runs out at the end of the calendar year, so we are in the nomination process right now. We've closed nominations, are now beginning the interviews, and are hoping to take on, our bylaws state that we need between 7 and 13. We've chosen to be at 7 for this last year, and so we know that we're going to need to grow by at least a couple new elders for this coming year. So stay tuned for that. Anytime that you have a concern or a compliment that you want to pass along to the elders, just know that if you email elders@dc2.me, that will just blast it out to all of us that serve on that team, and we'll get it with just that one email address. Okay, we alluded to this in the first service. Before we get there, I totally forgot. We have updated our congregational report. And so on the QR codes on the back of your chairs right now, if you click on that, one of the options in that link tree is called Financial Snapshot. Everything I'm about to go through here, these numbers will harmonize with exactly what's on there. Although, for those of you that are like accountants or love high-level specific data, you're going to pull that up and you're going to see a couple things there. The first tab will be a couple pie charts that are just kind of giving you good 30,000 foot level data, which will be a lot of what you'll see here. But if you're wanting to do a deeper dive, there's a second tab when you pull up that spreadsheet. That second tab will give you a month-by-month breakdown for the last year, a quarterly-by-quarterly breakdown, a year-end summary, all in much higher specific data. For those of you in the room that are like, I still am wanting more information, know that that's not something we say, sorry, this is the best that we're going to do for you. But that really just comes in the form of a coffee with either myself or, if you're lucky, Corbin, to really go through with a fine-tooth comb exactly what you're looking for. But know that on that QR code on the back of your chair, our intent is that that link stays there. We are continuing to refine how much is there. We've been working with our CPA and with our bookkeeper to make sure, are we putting too much information out there, like to the point of risk, or is this okay? And they've given us the thumbs up on this so far. So if there's more that you'd like to see, please do let me know, but know that that's there. I think if you're like me, the biggest thing on my chest that I wanted to get off as we were going through this morning is just to update you on the ask that the elders have made, and we teased this a little bit at the services today. But the fuller story here is that we have had a gap in our budget as we've been looking forward of about $20,000 a month. And so I've just been trying to figure out with our elder board, the only place to cut from at this point is staff. So do we just go, well, this is what offerings are. That's what the budget says it needs. We got to cut staff right now. It just felt like that wasn't the right move. And as we were looking through who's here and who's giving, there are plenty of people to still ask if they could help us close this gap. So roughly 300 homes are calling Discovery their home church. We've grown by about 15% over the last few years. Of this, we've shared some of this, so I am going to move through it quickly, but 133 people technically hit our charts as recurring givers. And so of 300 homes that call Discovery home, it does leave quite a few that are left up for grabs of would you consider giving a gift. We have heard, and it's some of you in the room, people who have said, look, we can't or don't want to give recurring, we want to give one time, but we're still totally all in at Discovery. Is that okay? Of course it is. I think for us, we're just trying to figure out, are there ways in the peaks and valleys of how much our offering vacillates? Can we level that out by having more people giving monthly? So if that's you, if you just love giving one time, that's wonderful. Thanks for doing that. But there's room to ask, which is the point. So how's it going? This is what we said this morning. 13 new donors out of those 167. So I would look at that and say, we got a little bit more room to go. But 38 current people have also increased their gifts. So we're looking at a total increase as of this Thursday, last Thursday, of just under $9,000. So that's awesome. To be clear, the $20,000 puts us in really, really good shape. So that is still the target that we're going to shoot for. But knowing that we've got $9,000 in hand moving forward every month, man, that's a huge nudge in the right direction. 167 homes are not giving, and 13 is a start. So we are intending to continue to find ways to creatively ask. The generosity of people who are here, I just can't tell you enough. We're like this church. The people here are amazing, and increasing a gift that you're already giving, it's tremendous. We are looking at December 31st as our day to consider what are we doing moving ahead. Has what we raised, if we fall short of 20,000, is it enough that we can still patchwork it together and keep going? Or will we have to make some of those cuts? And again, the only place really in our budget, we're so lean right now that the only place to make a meaningful cut will be in cutting staff. So that is the update on the donor asks. Behind that then, here are the numbers that are making us tick right now, both in our budget. And for this Floast and Finances, our fiscal year ends on September 30th. And so now that we're in October, we can actually compare this whole annual fiscal year to last year. And so all the numbers that I'm going to show you are comparing year to year, instead of what you usually do at Floats and Finances with, here's this quarter of this year compared to the same quarter of the previous year. So our income, total income here of $1.8 million, which is incredible. Offering accounts for about 1.66 of that. Last year, we were at 1.69, so you're seeing about a 15% total increase there in giving, which is a remarkable story in its own to be told. Our budget, as we built it for this year, which again, this is the budget, not that we are working with this $20,000 gap, but it is assuming we can raise this $20,000 if we can. That budget is budgeting 1.9 as our income that we need to make all the dots connect. Our expenses, comparing these last years, 1.8 this year compared to 1.832, I should say, compared to 1.881. That should raise an eyebrow a little bit of our expenses are actually down compared to last year. I think that is a testament to our staff who have continued to cut and trim as best as they possibly can. And again, obviously your budget is going to meet, your income is intended to meet your expenses in a budgeting process. So that's also that same 1.92 figure. There are a handful of things on here that if I were you, I'd be dog-earing for questions later. You may be wanting to know hey, partnerships, needs, response. What all does that mean? What's the total tithe? If there's questions like that, start keeping those in the back of your mind. The other big thing that you'll see when you pull up the QR code and the financial snapshot is there's a line item on there that I would encourage you may be the most important line item, and it's how many weeks ahead do we have in cash on hand. Our goal in our bylaws is to be at 14 weeks. It's not a hard and fast, we have to be there or else we start cutting systems. It's just that is the guiding light that we like to have. Last year, on average for the entire year, averaging out all 12 months, we were about 12.7 months ahead. This year, we've been averaging about 12.7 weeks ahead. This year, we're at 8.2 weeks. The goal is 14 weeks. So again, and I think that just is representing, we're watching our expenses grow, but our income not being able to keep up with it. And so we've been eating into those reserves, which is why, as an elder board, we're saying we really need to close that gap and get those numbers back up. So offering is lower than hoped for, but expenses are also lower. I want to make a note about our mortgage. When we built the coffee shop, our mortgage entered a construction loan process where we were paying only the interest during that time, not principal and interest. And December of last year, that went back up to its full interest and principal amount. That amount, the principal is about $12,000, $13,000 a month. And so having the fullness of the mortgage land back on our budget has been part of what we're carrying around. I mean, it's a big fat booty that we're dragging behind us everywhere that we go. We also, as we started the budgeting process this year, wanted to take a different approach because we've been so tight the last few years as we've been doing things that we haven't really been able to plan for reserves beyond those 14 weeks. And we know as this building continues to age that there are things like fixing the parking lot. It's about a $120,000 job to fix that. One of our AC units is just starting to act a little funky and grumpy. And so we're assuming in the next little while, a $25,000 AC unit we're going to have to repair. Our soundboard, God bless Alex and the folks that help run our sound booth, but we've got gremlins in those things like you wouldn't believe. And we would love right now to be able to just go out and buy a new one, and we can't, but we would love to have a fund so that the day that a wisp of smoke comes out of that thing, we can afford to buy a new one and not go a cappella for 9 straight weeks. So with that, the new approach has been we collect royalties because we own the mineral rights to the land, the 19 acres that we're on. And so could it be a better strategy to say all the money that we pull from those royalties is going to go into a reserve fund that is specifically for big expenses that we know that we have coming down the road? Instead of saying, oh, those royalties, that's just more income, bake it into the whole thing, and we just need that to keep paying the light bill and doing all the things that we do. So in separating that out, now effectively we've started building for ourselves a saving account for those rainy days that is beyond the 14 weeks of when something really catastrophic hits the fan. As we're moving through all of this and waiting for this $20,000 that we're asking for just to see where that lands, the staff have started back in September a spending freeze that will go until Christmas. We'll release that for Christmas time just because we think celebrating the birth of Jesus is really important. And then as we're evaluating at the end of the calendar year, we'll be just considering, is a spending freeze still necessary as we're moving into 2026, or will we let that go? I also wanted to be clear on this. We're not changing as we're looking forward what we're giving to our partners. When we say spending freeze, we don't mean that we're stopping or even reducing gifts to our local global partners, to our benevolence funds. These stay at full steam ahead. And part of the philosophy behind this, I would hope, would be exactly how you'd look at it in your own home, that when things get tight financially, the first thing that you cut is not your giving, but the first thing that you cut is where can we tighten the belt around this place first? And if the ends just aren't meeting each other at the end of the next few months, that's when we have to start facing the music that we just don't have the money, and then we can start messing with that giving. But thus far, we're really seeking not to touch that. So we've begun a new policy that when we drop below 10 weeks ahead in our budget, and again, we've been averaging 8.2 for this whole year. So this has kind of been the arena that we've been in. When we drop below 10, we let our local and global partners know, hey, things are tight. We just want to put you on notice that if we drop then below 8, we're going to need to reduce our giving by 50% to you until we climb back up above 8. If we drop below 6, we have to totally stop giving until we're riding the ship. And again, a lot of this is just built off of the same principles of how would you do this if this was around your house. The good news is we've been averaging 8.2, and since we've installed this policy, we have only been telling our partners, will you be praying for us? We're putting you on notice. It has been really fun hearing back from many of them, hey, thanks so much for telling us. We've actually have had some different kinds of gifts that have come back to us from our partners as we've entered into this. So the reciprocity that we're seeing play out here is really quite beautiful. But that's how we're thinking about this moving forward. So financially, I think the big ask is, and I think I have this slide, and I hope I will always have this slide every single time that we do floats and finances. Just pray that we're holding it well. I think you'd be really proud of how your elders are working behind closed doors, that we're not just looking at like, what's the bottom line of the spreadsheet say, and that's what we're going to do, but that they're really holding these things in prayer and in discernment as a community of elders. And it's not one person who leads the charge and says, I'm deciding what we're doing, but it is the whole team that is working together that's holding this in prayer. And also that I've loved being a part of this church for a long time, partly because of how risky we choose to be. And we're not a church that's going to build a $7 million nest egg that we don't know what we're doing with, but that we have money that we're setting aside to do active work in our community right now, and that we would choose to have the type of benevolence ministry that we have, and it's really expensive, and that's where we're spending money right now, so that we'd continue to risk in the places where it's necessary to risk. For sure, for wisdom and discernment. So that's it on the financial side. Again, as you're having questions, write them down or tuck them in the back of your mind. We'll have that Q&A that'll pop up in just a little bit. But I'm going to shift gears into our land use team. Just a reminder that the goal that this team has been working around is that we'd like to build an intergenerational community that drives interpersonal connectedness through multi-purpose services and programs. These pictures that are here are from the charrette that we did a couple years ago. Don't assert any meaning to those other than we've been working on this for a hot minute. This is the draft that if you read through the RFP, this is a good outline of what we have been proposing to developers. Here's what we'd like to do. If you've been paying attention to this process, the way that this goes is much like a conversation. Here's what we would like to do. What would you like to do? And we keep knocking this conversation back and forth until we get down to here's the plan that we're agreeing on, but we are not there yet. So this is just the first iteration of our side of the conversation. We put that out into the universe with a deadline for developers of if you want to talk back to us, you have a deadline by October 10th to let us know what you want to do. That deadline has come and gone. We have 6 proposals from developers, which is really, really wonderful. And they've all said, we want to be a part of this, and here's how. We are going to move ahead with 4 of those applications as we take our next steps, and we'll be interviewing them through November and December, and our pathway has kind of said by the end of January, beginning of February, our intent is to have one of these folks named if it feels like one of these is going to be our dance partner. Also, just as a quick aside, if you've been following this process, it's funny. Because if we go through this process and we say, yeah, we don't like any of those, let's just keep asking. You're continuing to put the same proposal back out to the same group of people, and you do start to winnow down who's actually paying attention anymore, because they've seen the same request over and over. So we do think that this is our best shot at finding a developer. And you guys, there's some really cool plans that developers are putting in front of us that we're really thrilled to get to talk with them about what they're wanting to do. So we really think that staying on track with this timeline of late January, early February feels really, really doable. Okay, cell tower. This is in here just because we've talked about it a bunch, and I didn't want to ignore it because I know for some people you're concerned about it. This has passed City Council. The last couple months, Verizon has been bringing out their own developers, doing the same process, bidding it out, who's going to build this thing. I was looking through notes, and last July at Feast and Finances, I told you that you could expect building within the next couple months because that's what they told us. And you can see how beautiful it is, the cell tower that's not out there. And so I'll just tell you, it will look like a silo, just a single tall grain silo. It's not to be confused with the ministry building that we've been talking about for a while on the other side of the playground that we also call the silo. It'll be on the dumpsters on the east side of the parking lot. There was some concern early on about what does this mean for radiation? Is that going to be a problem? So just so we are all on the same page, we have bought a radiation tester device, and so we're taking those readings every now and again, even right now before they build the thing, so that we can tell when the time comes. Of course, you're going to hear from a company like that, no, it's totally safe. But that way we just have our own independent data that we've been collecting to then hold up to the numbers that they're telling us are safe numbers to say, yes, this is actually what's happening and what our experience has been. So do know that. Also, just as an aside, when we talk about royalties, the cell tower is built into them. It's about a $2,200, $2,500 a month from Verizon check that gets written to us as here's the money for the cell tower that we built on your property. And they've been paying that to us for the last couple of years because that's what the contract said. And we're still waiting for it. So just so you know, we're grateful for that. And when it comes, you'll know. So Barn Door Coffee, just some quick updates on this. For those of you that have been around, you know these two stories that are up here, but been really remarkable. If you've been around at some point in the last couple months, every day is a little bit hit or miss, but the number of days where you come in and it's a struggle to find a chair to sit at is pretty fun. And it's not just a bunch of staff people that are sitting around taking up room, but it's a happening place. So it's really cool. And my favorite thing is how many folks are hanging out in our coffee shop that don't call Discovery home, people that I've never seen before. And so it really has been a delightful place. Financially, it's paying for itself. It pays its own rent back to Discovery, so they kind of keep their own independent budget from ours, but they pay in rent. Barn Door is covering 50% of Stacy, our coffee manager's salary, and then the church is paying for the other half of her salary. We do consider her an employee of Discovery Church. And then this last summer, we brought on Lauren Waring. And so if you've been here on a Tuesday or a Wednesday morning, you'll notice Lauren back behind. She is on part-time staff with Barn Door Coffee, and the coffee shop's covering the expenses of all of those things. So it's really doing a good job paying for itself and covering its expenses to us. And I don't know that this is news to anybody, but if you're looking for a place to have a meeting or to meet up with an old friend, this is a great spot to be. And it's fun to see how much the walls are continuing to drop invitations to people that don't go to church or don't go to this church as maybe I want to be here on a Sunday morning. There's just some cool things that can continue to come of those conversations. Walking prayers, just a reminder, as you're walking into the church, right by the plow, there's a little QR code there. It just sets you up to go on a walk around the property, and we change what you're praying for every 2 months. This was really started after a conversation with Joe Milan, after we built the barn, or as the barn was being built, I should say. Just heard a story from Joe, and Joe's certainly not the only one, who would drive up early in the morning on his way to work, and the sun would be coming up, and he would turn on his lights and shine them into the middle of this field where there was nothing, and he would just pray for this church that he loved, that was getting ready to build a huge barn. And I think for me, one of the fears always of being in a church that now has a building and we're established is that we just get really comfortable. And I love the moxie of a church that's meeting in a cafeteria or in an auditorium, that you long to have a building because you know what that building can do. And now that we have it, what are we longing for? And what are we continuing to pray for? What would we be willing to go on a walk for? So know that that's out there for you. It's a great thing to do with your family or with a friend or just by yourself. Okay, one more thing before we go into Q&A. I wanted to tell you some stories. I feel like sometimes I don't do a very good job of this particular part. So here's some things I want you to know. You have probably seen on Sundays every now and again a giant pile of dirt out in the east lot with a whole bunch of tractors or semis or something that looks official and not ours. That is a company called A1 Chip Seal, and they've been using the eastern lot here for the last several years just as a place a few times a year to have a centralized place for their crusher finds for different things they're doing around town. Sometimes they'll write us a little check as a thank you note. Sometimes they don't. And so this year, as they dropped something off, one of their guys dropped in to talk to Corbin, and he said, hey, we need to write you a check. What did we do last year? And Corbin shuffled his feet a little bit, and he said, well, you know what maybe would be better than a check is, will you go on a walk with me around our parking lot? And if you've been in our parking lot on your feet, you have seen some of the Grand Canyons that we're starting to put some signage around. They're getting so big. He said, instead of a check, what would it be like for you to write me a quote that would just smash any other quote I could possibly get from any other like company, that then I could take to our elders and say, it's going to cost us this much, but to patch this parking lot. We know that we don't have $120,000 to just make a new one right now, but could we patch it? The guy says, sure, I can do that. And so he comes back a few weeks later and sits down with Corbin. He starts running him through all the stuff. Here's how much this is going to cost, and that's going to cost, and blah, blah, blah. And they get to the end of the conversation. The bottom line, It's about, Corb, $35,000 or 18, I can't remember. $20,000. And we are like, Corbin and I, for sure, probably our staff at this point, the elders know, but like we're right on the front end of looking at all this budget stuff, like, okay, we don't have money. And that $20,000 is like a crazy deal based off the work that they want to do. And so it just feels like one of these moments of like, we can't afford to do it, but we can't afford to pass up that kind of a deal. And so, as you would too, Corbin, like hat in hand, like, well, thank you so much. Like, we're just not going to be able to move ahead with that right now. But like, we really appreciate the work that you've put in. Like, because that's the other thing, right? Like, the guy came out and was walking around doing, and he goes, oh, I totally forgot to tell you. I was talking to my boss about this because he asked why I was putting all this together for you. And he asked at one point, what are they doing with that eastern lot? And I told him that you guys have this affordable housing project that you're talking about. He goes, my boss is a really great guy, super like philanthropic. He's a Catholic dude. When he heard that and heard what I was doing for you guys, he said, hey, just let him know whatever the cost is, we'll cover it. And we would love to just do this work for them for free. So A1 Chip Seal had started a couple weeks ago. They fixed a huge problem that we had in front of our dumpsters, and you'll continue to see just some mastic. They're Band-Aids, really, that is going to go all over our parking lot. Just this super kind move in a time when we're kind of looking up at heaven going, we need some financial help. That kind of feels like this crazy thing came in the side door and we're like, we'll worship, we'll keep worshiping. Thank you. This is really cool. Benevolence. Met with Nancy, I think it was October 5th. And she was just had like face in her hands. And it's not super uncommon for our benevolence team over the course of a month to get asks for rental assistance, people who just can't afford to pay their whole bill. And by the end of a typical month in a typical year, I mean, you're talking like $8,000 total in asks. This year, so we start on October 1st, for example, and we'll go through the end of the month, and that's how we'll look at a month. So $8,000 usually requested in 31 days. By October 3rd, so 3 days into the calendar year, we'd had $16,000 asked for, with 27 days to go. And so I think just as a reminder of what we do in our benevolence ministries, the need is incredibly high. And I think as we've entered in through this last year, particularly through the summer and now into the fall, so many local families are really feeling the pinch and aren't able to pay. And for us, when we look at folks who are unhoused, this is one of the crucial places of if we can just keep somebody in their home, if we can patch them through long enough, the success rates of what that means for them and their kids' lives are just totally changed versus if they can't afford and they get evicted and now they're living out of their cars. Opportunities, lifestyles, I mean, the trajectory of their lives fundamentally change. So to get to say yes to these is a big deal. We haven't been able to say yes to $16,000. That's not in the budget. That's not in their budget. It actually wouldn't be responsible with how some of these requests come through. But that benevolence team is working their fannies off to say yes to as many of these things as we can. I just want you to know, by way of story, the need and the way that our church can show up and be a light in dark places for individual families is huge. And the last story is this. As Jake was thinking through with Jen Webster through the end of the spring, and as Jake went on sabbatical and Jen and I got to work on some things through the summer, our hope as we were looking at classes for this coming fall was that we could host at least a few of them all together on a Wednesday night, and that it could begin with a dinner that people would have all together and then would break from there to go to their classes. Jen's been leading a class called Alpha, which is connected to a curriculum that's international. It's incredible. And Jake has been leading a class called Ordinary Discipleship that's just for people who are like, I understand Christianity, just nobody's ever discipled me or taught me how to disciple anyone else, walking through what are the nuts and bolts of this. The other class has been the Managing Leadership Anxiety class that's been meeting during that same time. So the relational connection that comes at that dinner time is really, really special. We were sitting in a staff meeting about a week or two out from when these classes were launching, and totally off the cuff, leaned over to Jake and Jen, was like, hey, where are we at on classes? Do we have, like, how many open spots? Usually there's room. And both of them, like, did some quick calculations and pretty quickly were like, no, they're all full. Like, we've got wait lists going for so many of these classes. Like, we're at capacity. And I think if there's ways to take the temperature of a church and assess health, like, is this thing doing okay? It's been one place where I've been smiling and nodding going, That is really cool. And the thought of folks showing up on a Wednesday night going, I want to learn how to disciple someone, and some other folks showing up for an alpha class going, I want to learn what it means to follow Jesus. And after 8 weeks together going, you want to keep having dinner on Wednesday? Oh, it's beautiful. So continue to pray and hope for those, but know that that's another fun story of how those are built. So, okay, that was a whole bunch of information coming at you. Would love to open up some time, as we have typically done here. If you'll ask the question, I'll repeat it for the folks who are watching online. But have at it. What do you want to know more about? Yeah, go ahead, John. And Steve next.
What is the balance of the mortgage? And we've been paying interest only since day one?
No, good question. So we have been paying principal and interest. Oops, sorry. Thanks, John. The question is, have we been paying interest only on the mortgage, and what's the total balance of the mortgage as of right now? Thanks, John Neal. Okay, John Netherly. Balance right now is about $3.6 million remaining. We typically are paying principal and interest on that. We were only paying interest while we were in the construction loan process of building on the coffee shop. So while we're doing that, because of all the extra expenses, the Solomon Foundation, who holds that mortgage, just says, oh, we'll help you out by taking that principal off. You've usually got about 12 months when you've entered into construction where they'll give you that term, and then at the end of that 12 months, so our last December, that's when they said, okay, we're back to the full principal and interest. So usually we're paying both of those numbers. The whole of both of those, the principal and interest, is $33,000 a month. So it's pretty hefty percentage of a $160,000 budget. So, yeah. Yeah, Steve Williams?
So, reserves.
Reserves.
Do you have any reserve fund at all over and above the targeted 14 weeks?
So right now above the 8.2, oh, thanks, John Neal, you're the best. Do we have any reserves at all besides the 14 weeks, besides these reserve funds? No, as we are looking at our budget right now, the 8.2 that we've held average for this last year, I think we finished the end of September about 9. 8.1. 8.1. We did have one big gift that came in at the beginning of October, which is going to pop us back up just a little bit. So, but those are the reserves that we have as a church. So, yeah.
In reading some information that's online recently, as far as the land next door that's potentially going, is that going to be sold, or is it going to be leased, or is it going to be what?
Yeah, great question. The question is, the eastern lot that the land use team has been working on, is that going to be sold? Is that going to be leased? What's going to happen there? So Solomon Foundation owns the mortgage on all of the land. And so the answer to this question really begins with the Solomon Foundation. What do they need from us as we enter into this process? And they've just kind of said, we need to be nowhere a part of that parcel if you guys are doing affordable housing. And so we need to offload that from your mortgage. So that can come in two ways. Either you guys just buy us out of that particular part, and we can assess how much value is on the western parcel, which is a lot. I mean, probably 85% of the value is here because of the barn and all the infrastructure here, 15% there. So do we want to buy 15% of a $3.6 million mortgage, and then we own it, and now we can lease it or rent it, or it's ours, which frankly, financially, we're looking at going, well, we don't, we've got 8.1 weeks. Like, we don't have that to be able to do. So the next option is, as we're going through this RFP process and working with our developers, what are they proposing? Most of this is going to come in the form, John, of a sale, which is why this part of the process for us in the RFPs, talking with developers, doing these interviews is so important, because as soon as we decide, here's what we're saying we're going to do together, and we sign papers, now we release this baby into the wild, and it's now the developers to raise. And so we need to agree of what are we wanting this thing to become. There are some options that are available that we're going to continue to weigh. Some of the developers have come back and said we could work out a land lease or something like that. So those are questions that the land use team will be asking in the interview process, and then bringing ultimately back to the elder board to say, is this viable? Is this a way we want to move forward? Obviously, just like any other place in finance, if we just outright sell it, it's a large sum of cash now, big advantage in the short term. If we hang on to it or do a lease, we don't get that bump now, but we do get a long-term kickback. So we're keeping mind of all of that. But I think I would encourage you that the answer you should be hearing is we're probably going to sell, but we're leaving our options open. So, yes, hey Deb.
So earlier you mentioned putting aside the royalties, and what I heard you say, could be wrong or right, was that you were going to put aside all of the royalty money for that.
Correct.
Whatever we need, I got that part. But then how does that look if you take that money away from the income that we're looking at?
Yes.
How does that work with $20,000?
Yep. Yep, great question. So the question is, if we're taking royalties now effectively out of our income and saving those for rainy days, which are a little bit different than our cash reserves, what does that mean for then our income for our typical budget? What's going on there? So yes, the $20,000 as we've asked for that is assuming that is the philosophy of our budget moving forward. So if that $20,000 comes in, that's actually then what frees up this royalty money to then be set aside. It's also part of the precariousness of what the next few months will mean by way of conversation and prayer is if we say have $15,000 that comes in but not 20, do we say, well, now we got to take bites out of this royalty money that's coming in? And that the Verizon money is pretty static. The mineral rights vacillate all over the place. It just depends on market rates of gas and all that kind of stuff. So, but are we continuing to use that to supplement a little bit of what we need to make the total budget or not? So the guiding light is if we can raise 20,000, that actually frees up all the royalties that they are getting saved, and we're totally in a healthy spot. So yeah, go ahead.
Just additional, so what I heard you say then is of the 20, we have almost 10.
Yeah. Of the 20 that we're looking for, we have about $9,000. So little ways to go, but still certainly a lot of people that we have yet to ask and hear back from. Yeah. Yeah, Steve.
So I noticed it went by pretty fast on the budget. I noticed you had a category and one more. Go the other direction. There you go. Other. That's a pretty big chunk.
Yes.
22%.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Expenses. Corbin, I know you're in the back of the room. Do you mind speaking to this a little bit? I'm trying to remember all the conversations we had this week about it.
So what other represents is a significant part of what it costs to run a facility.
I'll repeat it, Al. Yeah, I can summarize.
So it's a significant part of what it costs us to run the building. And then also what's in other is some of the expenditures from the staff when running their ministries that don't fall into the categories that are listed on that graph.
So electric bill is going to be in here, right? Yeah. Is there an example of a ministry expense that doesn't fit into a different category?
Well, like worship arts.
Yeah. And I assume retreats don't necessarily fit into some of these other things. So there's a lot just ministry expenses. And again, Steve, I think that's something that if you're I want to see more of the breakdown, a quick coffee with Corbin and I, we'd love to just bust open the budget and have a look at all of it with you. But yeah. And the second tab on that financial snapshot on the QR code hopefully helps give a little bit more. It's not there. Okay, that's right. Because we had removed it because they told us it was too much information. That's right. Yeah, you can grab us for a coffee. We can share more. They, as our CPA and our bookkeeper, as we were trying to figure out how much information can we put out there, I think where we're trying to be really liberal and transparent of lots of information. They're hey, if anybody can jump on your website and they find out you've got $500,000 in a checking account, you're going to get robbed. So don't put all that information out there. So trying to be judicious with how much transparency and information we can put out there without being foolish. So taking their lead on that. Yeah. What else? Yeah, Kath.
I remember a couple years ago, and I think it was before COVID, there was a budget necessary where some of the staff, they were asked to not be paid.
Yes.
Is that a consideration instead of removing that position?
Yep, great question. So Kathy's question is, there was a time, it was in the midst of COVID, where staff were furloughed here and there. So I think the situation around, and I will speak as lead pastor. This is not something I'm speaking with the full authority of the elder board. So let me be clear on that, and if I need to apologize later, I will. COVID was weird, turns out. There was so much uncertainty. And so I think for Discovery at the time, as we're walking through furloughs and making some of those conversations, the government was providing some of these stipends, but there was a delay in you apply, when do you get money, what hits when. And so I think at that point there was a sense of, we think all the money's going to be here eventually, but it's not here right now. And so we have to solve the cash flow problem for this week. But we don't have to let people go, because in 3 months we'll be ready to rehire that same position back because the money will be there. So I think that was a time where it was like, what levers do we have to pull to keep everybody on board? And something like a furlough is a great solution. I think with what we're looking at now, it's not COVID. So we're looking at much more stable income, much more stable expenses. So we are looking at, like, we can see the horizon at this point. So I think we are just looking at the bar graph going, are these lines ever going to touch? Because if they're not, it's foolish to keep spending the amount of money hoping that more giving is going to come when we're driving ourselves further into bankruptcy. That's not smart. But if we're spotting it this far out and going, okay, $20,000, if we can raise that, we can actually help these lines meet, and then we're in a really healthy spot. So I think there is an inevitability of, if those lines aren't going to touch, furloughing staff is actually just a permanent salary decrease for everybody. And I would encourage us as a church congregation, our staff aren't doing this because they're getting rich. They're living on pretty tight incomes. And so to take less of that to say, no, but we're all better together, I think for some of us it's like, okay, we're touching poverty line as it is. Now we're well into it. It is the kinder thing to just look ourselves in the mirror as a church and go, we can't afford all this. We got to figure out how to do less. Can they call the benevolence line? Sure. Hopefully we can avoid that. Yeah, go ahead, Kat.
Is it possible to look at how our partners, that if we're giving them money, and like yesterday I was here for an event, and do we consider part of that their 10%, like using the building and using?
Good question.
And I don't know.
Yeah.
I know Corbin knows how much it costs to have the auditorium.
Yeah.
But would we consider that their 10% could be when they use the building,
Mm-hmm.
or when a staff goes on a missions trip to
Yep.
go see them? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I don't know how the
Yeah, no. Good questions. I mean, we've talked a lot about it as a staff. The question is, when we're considering what's tithing, when we're hosting an event here for Hope Kids, is the money that it costs to run the building, which, Corbin, back me up, $300 an hour? The entire building? Yeah. $300 an hour. Are we considering that money that is coming out of our pocket as part of that tithing money? And it's something like a missions trip and the money that we're spending to send our groups to go visit these partners. Is that considered part of this tithing money? So as we've built the budget, especially this last year, that certainly entered the picture of like, okay, we need to find dollars. Where else can we find dollars? And for a hot second, we were really honed in on our tithing of like, what do we call tithing? Elders had conversations about it. Staff had a bunch of conversations about it. And I think in the end, I find it's really helpful to think about tithing for our church the same way that I think about tithing for my home, as best as I can. And so I think there's a realm where every time I have somebody over for coffee at my house, if I'm like, oh, I'm going to count that, and then I'm going to count this. And like, at some point it's like, no, that's hospitality. Like, that's different than tithing. The most honest way to look at tithing is like, well, are we giving 10%? Like, that's the starting blocks, but are we doing that? And I think even looking at this graph right here, I mean, adding together 4.9 and 4.3, that's not quite all of it. And then there are different ways where that's coming out that won't show up in a partnership or a needs response that we think we're really, really at and pretty well above 10%. Are we going to count things like building use and all those other things? No. And one thing that has come out of these conversations is we do want to do a better job of tracking that. So as we're reporting to the congregation, hey, we're giving away 14% of our budget, also, this is another way that we're adding on to the top of that. I think it just felt like a more genuine way to practice generosity than to be counting every coffee that we have at our house. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm hot on your heels with the reasoning behind it. So, anybody else?
Zach, it seems like I guess what I'm wondering is if we've done a lot of analysis on giving in the past. So we have a pre-COVID model where we did things differently, where we actually passed a basket and people held something that sort of reminded them that, oh yeah, it's part of my thing of coming here.
Yep.
Is to actually give to this church. But also even as we approach Christmas time, visitors that come, certainly, I've never done Christmas out of town, but certainly if I was with some relatives and going to church there, I'd want to support their church.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like those opportunities don't exist and there's not that tangible reminder.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if we've analyzed if that is
Yeah.
and if so, how can we strategically come around it and maybe put something
Yep.
tangible back in the hands of the people here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. The question is, pre-COVID, not uncommon for baskets to be passed as a part of every service that we have around here, just offering baskets. And if we're trying to analyze how do we drive income and offering, have we thought about bringing something like that back? So, Mike, yes, it's a great question. I don't know that we have an answer, and I'll share it with you now. I don't know that it's the right one. And so I think for other folks in the room, as you're hearing this answer, if you're like, I don't think that's right, I would love to hear from you. I think this is just one of those tricky, what do we do? So back in the day, I mean, the church I grew up in as a kid was also in an era where you had a wallet that had this thing called cash in it, and your mom also had a checkbook in her purse. It was wild times. And so the exchange of money was a very physical, tangible exchange. And so passing a basket, everybody was ready for that. In our era of today, especially the younger the generations are getting, nobody keeps cash on them, period. And no one's heard of a checkbook. And so do we pass a card reader around the room? That might be a solution. But I think, too, as we were watching, less and less people were bringing cash, and that's really happening at the same time as we're watching all of these online systems. I mean, it was PushPay back in the day, now it's through Planning Center and Church Center, that if you want to set up a recurring gift, I mean, the brilliance of all of that, too, is if my family misses church for a month, we just don't give that month, or maybe we catch it up the next month. But if I can set it up through my bank or online, then it's just pulling every month, and I just am rest assured it's happening. For sure, there's pluses and minuses to both of those systems, but generally I think we're looking at the world going, we can pass baskets. I mean, part of what led to the decision of like, let's stop doing that, is baskets would get to the back of the room and have $5 in them. And psychologically, what's that doing to the room as you're passing around a relatively empty basket and people are going, oh, that's apparently not something that we do around here, or I feel really bad for this church, or this place is going down, this will be my last Sunday here. Like, who knows what's going on, but I think it is like, do we do it anyway? Because I agree, I think there is something to, it's a good, like you touch it, like it's a physical reminder of like, oh yeah, this is something I should be doing. And when we're doing video announcements once a month, and you're hearing is kind of that last part that you might be tuning out by that point, like, by the way, if you want to give Discovery, here's how you do it. That is really tricky. So, we have been having conversations, as you're asking, I'm like swimming in a little bit of shame that we've wanted to get better about being like, there's black boxes in the back of the room, that's what those are for. They're not like holding lollipops. That's for giving if you want to give physically. But that's kind of been the conversation that we've been swirling around. So I think, again, if you or if anyone has a passionate thought that they'd love to share, you can email me or grab me afterwards. I'd love to hear what a good idea would be surrounding that. So maybe it's card readers. Anybody else? All right. I'll hang around for a little bit if you're like, I had a question, but I didn't want to ask in front of the whole room. That's totally fine. I think with y'all here, anybody who's still watching the video at this point, I want to just growl a little bit and be like, this is a good time to be a part of Discovery Church. There are good things happening here. There are good things happening in the world of discipleship. There are good things happening in the world of benevolence. There are good things happening in the world of an affordable housing project. What did God make the church for? And I just hear that question, I growl at it, and I go, I don't know, but we're sniffing at parts of it. And I'm happy. I'm really happy to be a part of a church that's doing the things that we're doing. So, again, thanks for sticking around late on a Sunday. I know we're missing lunch times and some things like that, but let me pray for us one more time, and then we can sneak out of here. Yeah, God, I am for sure the cranky old lady in the parable who's the squeaky wheel, who's bothering you with this request for $20,000 a month. So here I am again. That's what we'd really like to have as we're moving forward. And I think it's funny I just chuckle at preaching out of Zechariah and then coming straight into what feels like a business meeting, but really if they're all the same, I am still looking at a Messiah who is the cornerstone, and I'm still looking into the face of Eden with a mindset that says, chill out, and it's all going to be okay. And so whether more than $20,000 comes, or whether $9,000 is going to be the ceiling that we hit, you are good. And the things that you are doing and will continue to do here are good. And I'm delighted to get to be here at this time, whether staff or as a member of a church. I don't care. I'm just happy to be here. Thanks for these folks who care for this place and who are good stewards of their money and our money, that they would care to lean in and learn. And I do pray for our elders, and I pray for our staff, that you would give us wisdom and discernment with how to use well what we're being given. We'd steward well how we represent our whole church community to the community around us. And I pray for wisdom and discernment for everyone who calls this church home, that in the ways that they are managing their own money and their own mission and calling, that they would risk, and that they would be shrewd, and that they would be covered in wisdom. May your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right. Thanks, y'all.